Hello friends, continuing our training videos on the LS brand M100 inverter. Today we want to talk about another great feature of the M100 inverter. The feature we're going to discuss and learn about today is the local remote or second source feature in the M100 inverter. What is this feature? If we want to provide a frequency to the inverter or perform a start-stop from two different points, we can use the second source feature, which is also known as local remote. How does it work? The specific condition for using the local remote or second source feature, which allows you to provide frequency or start-stop from two different points, is that one of your inverter's digital inputs must be defined in the second source mode. This means if that digital input is at logic 0, your inverter will be frequency controlled by the first source, for example, the knob on the keypad itself. And if that digital input is at logic 1, the inverter will be frequency controlled by, for example, a 4 to 20 milliamp sensor or a 4 to 20 milliamp module. Now let's look at the parameters we need to set in this mode. Our first frequency source. That is when our digital input is at logic 0 and the second source mode is not yet active. Our first frequency source is the FRQ parameter. So in the FRQ parameter, we specify the first point from which we want to provide the frequency to the inverter. Through what means? Via voltage or current analog input, the inverter's keypad or the keypad knob. In this training video, our first point is through the knob on the keypad. If you want your frequency to be controlled by the keypad knob, you must set the FRQ parameter to the number 2. However, for start-stop at the first point, it's DRV. For example, we want the start-stop at our first point to be via the keypad. So we must set the DRV parameter to the number 0. So up to this point, DRV is the first point start-stop and FRQ is the first point frequency source. But when our digital input is activated, meaning our second source is active, which parameters are the start-stop source and the frequency source. Parameter BA04 specifies how your start-stop is controlled at the second point. For example, we want our start-stop to be via the keypad at the first point and at the second point BA0. 5 to be via digital inputs, or perhaps have both points controlled from the keypad. But for the digital input that's going to enable and disable the second source, meaning it determines local and remote, you need to enter the in parameter group. In IN 65 to 69, P1 through P5, whichever digital input we want to define as the second source, we must set its corresponding parameter to the number 22. For instance, in this tutorial video, we want to use P3. We must set in 67 to the number 22. Now, the wiring we want to do in this tutorial video is that we want our first frequency reference to be on the inverter's own potentiometer. So we must set the FRQ parameter in the M100 inverter to 2. So our first frequency reference is via this keypad potentiometer. But for our second source, our second point, we want our frequency reference to be via this current module. So we must set the FRQ parameter in the main group to 5, but this 0-1 switch determines if my frequency reference is on the potentiometer or the analog current module. We said we want to use the P3 digital input. We define this as the second source, meaning we set in 67 to the number 22. If this digital input of ours is inactive, our frequency reference is via the keypad potentiometer. But if this digital input, this 0-1 switch, is active, our frequency reference is no longer via the potentiometer. Our frequency is adjusted through this analog current input via this module. Let's go and apply all the settings we've learned about this feature on the M100 inverter and test it together. Alright, we said that to first enable the local remote or second source feature, we must first define a digital input. And here we've chosen digital input P3, which is parameter in 67 as the second source mode. We set it to 22, meaning we set in 67 to 22 and confirm it. Okay, DRV is the start-stop location for the first point. We want it to be on the keypad. We'll use these green and red buttons to start and stop it. We set it to 0 and confirm it. FRQ is our first point's frequency source. We want the first point to be adjusted with this keypad knob for the frequency value. So we set it to 2 and confirm it. Alright, that's the start, stop, and frequency source for our first point. Now for the second point, we go into parameter BA4. This is the second point start, stop. We want the second point start, stop to also be done via these green and red keypad buttons. We set that to 0 as well. But BA5 is the frequency source for the second point. We said we want our second point to be via the current module, the 4 to 20 milliamp one. We must set BA5 to 4. We set it to 4 and confirm it. Right now, my P3 digital input, my 0-1 switch is at logic 0. So it should be started and stopped and frequency controlled via the first point. I'll start the inverter. You see, by turning the keypad knob, my frequency value changes. That was the start, stop, and frequency source for the first point. But if I want to control the frequency via this 4 to 20 milliamp current module, I must activate the second source digital input. I'll activate it. I'll start the inverter. My second point start-stop was also via the keypad. Now if I adjust this current module, changing the 4 to 20 milliamp value, you'll see the inverter's frequency value change. So in this tutorial video, we managed to use a digital input, a 0-1 switch, to provide frequency to the inverter from 2 points and start and stop it.